the Sea King's daughter from Russia. Long ago, in the river port city of Novgorod the Great, there lived a young musician named Sadko. Every day, some rich merchant or trader would call upon him to play at a feast. He would grab his 12-string gusli and go immediately there and play until all the guests were dancing. "Eat your fill," the hosts would always tell him afterwards while tossing him a few small coins. And on such a Sadko was given did he live. He was a happy man. Who else could go to a different feast every day, play the music he loved, and set a whole room dancing? And he was proud of his city of Novgorod, which was the richest and the most free in all of Russia. He loved to go down to the marketplace and walk around and see the merchants and the traders from faraway places. He would go to the piers and see the sailing vessels filled with their precious cargo. And walking across the great bridge over the river Volkhov was its name, he would see the shining rooftops from a dozen white stone churches. What other city is there like this, like Novgorod in all the world? He would say as he walked over that bridge, looking down the river. And yet at times, Sadko felt lonely. The many maidens who danced to his music at the feasts would often smile at him. And more than one had set his heart aflame. But they were rich, and he was poor, and he knew that none of them would ever have him. On one lonely evening, he walked beyond the city gates alone, down to the broad river Volkhov. And there, along the banks, he went to his favorite spot, and he set his gusli on his lap. Gentle waves broke on the bank. Moonlight shimmered on the water. Ah, my lovely river Volkhov, rich man, poor man, it's all the same to you, if only you were a woman. And then he started to pluck a sad tune on his gusli. The tinkling notes of it floated out over the Volkhov. Suddenly, the water grew rough and strong waves started beating on the shore. And as he looked in amazement, a huge figure of a man rose up out of the river. He had on a pearl-encrusted crown, atop a flowing mane of seaweed. "Behold, musician, the king of the sea. To this river I have come to visit one of my daughters, the Princess Volkhova. Your sweet music has reached us on the river bottom, and we are greatly pleased." Thank you, Your Majesty. I must return to my own palace, and I wish for you to come there and play at the feast. Gladly, Your Majesty. Where is your palace, and how do I get there? Well, it's below the sea, of course, and I'm sure that you will find your own way there. In the meanwhile, you should not have to wait for your reward. And just then, something jumped out of the water and flopped at Sadko's feet. It was a large fish with golden scales. And as he watched, it stiffened until it turned to solid gold. "Your Majesty, you are too generous." "Say no more about it. Music is worth far more than gold." And he disappeared again under the surface of the water. Well, Sadko took his golden fish to the marketplace the very next morning, and he sold it to an astonished merchant. Then he went to the piers and he booked passage on a ship leaving Novgorod that very day. Down the Volkhov, the ship sailed across Lake Ladoga and the Gulf of Finland and out into the Baltic Sea. As the ship sped across the deep water, Sadko leaned over the rails and wondered, in all this wide sea, how am I ever to find the palace? Just then, the ship shuddered to a sudden halt. Wind filled the sails, but the ship stood completely still as if being held by a giant hand. Sailors cursed, others prayed for their lives. The captain cried out, "It must be the king of the sea. Perhaps he seeks tribute, or maybe one of us." Sadko called out, "Have no fear. I know for whom he comes." And clutching his goosely tubing, he leapt over the rails and plunged beneath the waves. Down and down Sadko sank, until finally he reached the floor of the sea. Before him stood a white stone palace. Going through the coral gates, he came to immense doors, which opened as he approached, and revealed a giant hall in which were many guests and royal attendants, fish and sea creatures of all kinds. And standing among them were dozens of maidens, river nymphs, who were the daughters of the Sea King and his queen. And there, on a shell throne at one end of the hall, sat the Sea King himself and his queen. "Musician, you are just in time. Come here, sit by me, and let the dancing begin." Sadko plucked a merry tune, and soon all the guests were dancing. The fish, they swam in graceful figures. The other sea creatures cavorted, and the maidens, the river nymphs, they danced and leaped and spun. "I like this tune," cried the king, and he leapt off of his throne, and he went to the center of the room and joined the dancing. His arms were waving wildly around, his robes were twirling, and his feet were stomping, his long mane was streaming. Play it faster, he cried. And as Sadko did, his dance grew even more wild, ever more wild. But the queen leaned over and said, "Musician, you must end your tune. You may think that the king merely dances here in this great hall, but up above, the sea is tossing ships around like toys, and giant waves are crashing on the shores everywhere." Alarmed, Sadko pulled at one of the strings of his goosely until it snapped. "My goosely has broken, your majesty. I'm so sorry." "Ha! 'Tis a shame, I will say. I could have danced for days. Still, you are a fine man, musician. I think I will marry you to one of my daughters. That way, I can keep you here forever." Very cautiously now, Sadko spoke. "Your Majesty, I know that here beneath the sea, your word is law. But this is not my home. I love my city of Novgorod." "Say no more about it. Prepare yourself to choose your bride. Daughters, come forth." And all of the maidens lined up and walked, paraded past Sadko one by one, each one more beautiful than the one before. But Sadko's heart was heavy. He hardly looked at them. "What's the matter, musician? Too hard to choose between my beautiful daughters? Well then, I'll wed you to the one that I know fancies you. Behold, my daughter, the Princess Volkova." And she stepped forward. Her green eyes were sparkling, and a gentle smile graced her lips. "My dearest Sadko, at last we can be together. For years my heart has thrilled at the sound of your music which you have played on the shore." "Volkova, why, you're more beautiful than your river." And the queen leaned over and whispered softly, "Sadko, you are a good man. So I will tell you the truth. If you but once kiss or embrace her, you can never return to your city again. That night, Sadko lay next to his bride on their bed of seaweed, thinking, she's so lovely, she's so charming, all I ever hoped for. How can I not hold her? But then the words of the queen would time and again come back to his mind. You can never return to your city again. And his arms lay frozen at his sides. Dearest, why do you not embrace me? Oh, well, you see, in my city of Novgorod, we have a custom there that we never kiss or embrace on the first night. Well, she said sadly then, I fear we never will. And she turned away. The next morning, when he awoke, Sadko felt the sunshine on his face. And when he opened his eyes and turned and looked, he found next to him not the Princess Volkova, but the river Volkov. And behind him rose the great walls of Novgorod. My home! And he wept, perhaps for joy at his return, perhaps for sorrow at his loss, perhaps for both. The years were good to Sadko. With the remaining money from the golden fish, he bought his own ship and plenty of goods to fill it. And what's more, so he became a merchant and in time the richest man in all of Novgorod. And in time he did marry a fine young woman, and they raised a family. And many a feast did Sadko hold, so that he could play his gusli and watch his children dance. And yet, sometimes still, on a quiet evening, he would walk out of the city alone, along the banks of the river Volkov. And he would send his tinkling music across the water. And sometimes, too, a lovely head would lift up out of the waves to listen. Or perhaps it was only moonlight